April 24, 2025. Dawn breaks over the Taiwan Strait. The guided missile destroyer USS William P. Lawrence slices through calm seas under clear skies. For her crew, it might have felt like just another freedom of navigation patrol. But in these waters, tension is a constant, unseen passenger thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, China broke the morning quiet, not with a radio call, but with a full press statement from the PLA Eastern Theater Command. The message, broadcast loud and clear: "We see you, and we're not happy." Beijing announced naval and air forces were deployed, shadowing and warning the American warship. State media lit up with live updates, leaked footage. Published radar tracks a clear signal: "You are unwelcome here." The American response: silence. No urgent press briefings from Washington. No defiant tweets. The USS Lawrence simply held her course, a steady presence slicing through the strait as if nothing unusual was happening. What Beijing decried as a provocation, the U.S. Navy turned routine. But this Tuesday was far from routine. The destroyer wasn't just asserting navigational rights. She was deliberately sailing through contested waters Beijing fiercely claims as its own sovereign territory. It was a move fraught with peril, where diplomatic saber-rattling could ignite into actual sparks in seconds. This was a high-stakes game of cat and missile playing out on the waves. And in this game, the Lawrence refused to flinch. While headlines in Beijing screamed about illegal trespassing and serious provocations, the destroyer maintained her planned transit path. Not an inch of deviation. No evasive maneuvers, no surge of speed, just a steady, deliberate glide through the waters international law designates as open. The silent message was unmistakable: "We don't ask permission." For the U.S. Navy, this wasn't an escalation, it was standard procedure. Freedom of navigation operations FONOPs are the Navy's way of drawing invisible lines, asserting rights in contested seas like the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. Calmly, legally, purposefully, and they rarely sail alone. Though the Lawrence wasn't broadcasting her presence with her eyes beacon, she wasn't hiding. Her radar signature was clear. Overhead, military satellites fed real-time data back to the Pentagon. Eyes in the sky, ears beneath the waves, likely including a silent Virginia-class submarine shadowing nearby. You don't walk into disputed territory without backup. China knew this within hours. Chinese media released grainy drone footage, a planned Type 05-D destroyer tailing the American ship. At a distance, reports claimed J-16 fighters buzzed the area close, but crucially, not close enough to trigger an automated defensive response. PLA pilots often push the limits, but there's a line everyone understands: cross it, fly too close. Attempt to block passage, and the situation could spiral instantly. The rules of engagement here are finely tuned, but terrifyingly fragile. One wrong radar lock, one misinterpreted maneuver, and the next sound wouldn't be diplomacy, but the distinct hum of an Aegis combat system going hot. The Lawrence completed her transit in under 12 hours. No incidents, no deviations. But the silence wasn't peace, it was pressure building. Just as the destroyer disappeared into the Pacific haze, another pressure point ignited hundreds of miles south, across the Luzon Strait. Warships converged. The Philippines and the United States launched Exercise Balikatan, their largest joint drill ever. Over 14,000 troops, dozens of ships, jets, missile batteries, amphibious rehearsals. The timing, undeniably deliberate. Within hours of China's warning about the Lawrence, U.S. Marines were landing HIMARS rocket systems on a Philippine beach. It was a show of force, certainly, but also a pointed message to Beijing: we're not just sailing past, we're setting up firing positions just over your horizon. This is called shaping the battle space. China was watching, having flexed its own muscle days earlier when its Shandong carrier strike group cruised past the Philippines' northern coast inside their exclusive economic zone, sending ripples of alarm through Manila. Beijing's message: we can flank you. But the Philippines, backed by the U.S., didn't back down. While China released its intercept footage, U.S. Pacific Command compiled a detailed picture from satellites, drones, and ships, every PLA maneuver logged, tagged, filed. Behind the polite diplomatic statements, planners from Okinawa to Guam asked the quiet, crucial question: How far is China truly willing to go this time? Because if these were no longer just games, but the opening act of something far worse, then every destroyer transit, every joint drill, every carrier deployment wasn't just deterrence, it was a dress rehearsal. Steel was moving across the sea, fast. Beijing didn't blink, but it didn't stay quiet either. A second, sharper statement emerged from the Eastern Theater Command. Illegal, provocative, irresponsible, no longer suggestions, but accusations. State media anchors warned of hostile infiltration, calling the transit a dangerous show of muscle. Behind the rhetoric lay a deeper narrative China desperately wants the world to accept, that the Taiwan Strait isn't international waters, but a domestic corridor, their internal sea, where foreign warships need permission to pass. They've worked for years to establish this interpretation, but international law, specifically the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea UNCLOS, which China itself has signed, says otherwise. It recognizes the Taiwan Strait as an international waterway. The US treats it as such, like any other global strait. This clash of definitions isn't mere semantics, it's fundamental doctrine. If the world accepts China's view, every future transit becomes leverage for Beijing. If the US continues sailing through, unchallenged and unapologetic, China's narrative crumbles. And the US wasn't just sailing through, it was doing so while allies drilled live-fire exercises nearby, and advanced surveillance platforms watched China's coast. This wasn't coincidence, it was counterpressure. China found itself reacting to the transit, to the drills, to the unsettling realization that its coastline was no longer an impenetrable wall, but a window through which the US Navy was watching intently. By the time the USS William P. Lawrence cleared the strait, the region held its breath, watching not for speeches, but for the next move signaled by satellites and sonar. That single transit hadn't changed the map, but it had palpably changed the tone, shifted the rhythm. In Beijing, the PLA reacted. Assets moved faster. Frigates docked for maintenance were suddenly at sea. Air patrols intensified. Even civilian ferries reported unusual radar interference, perhaps airborne early warning systems, hunting for American submarines. On the American side, there was no slowdown. The Lawrence rejoined Strike Group 5, centered around the carrier USS Carl Vinson, steaming east a formidable wall of steel. Overhead, P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft looped, scanning for any hostile signatures. And caught in the middle, Taiwan quietly upgraded its own defense posture. Subtle shifts, more intercept flights, increased radar activity, busier logistics hubs, more traffic on roads leading to mountain bunkers. Everyone was preparing. No shots were fired, but the rules of the game had shifted. China had perhaps assumed the US was risk-averse, that loud warnings would induce hesitation. The Lawrence's cool professionalism shattered that assumption. The message, "We are not asking." If this becomes the norm, China's entire gray zone strategy, its gradual salami slicing of control, begins to unravel. When your adversary stops fearing your reaction, you lose leverage. Beijing knew this, hence the loud propaganda, the edge of limits flyovers, the looped video of the planned destroyer tailing the Lawrence, desperate attempts to project control. But true control isn't about tailing a ship, it's about shaping what that ship does next. And right now, the initiative seemed firmly in American hands. This transit was more than a standoff, it was a stress test. The US tested Beijing's red lines, its willingness to escalate. The strait didn't erupt, but the seams showed increased communications chatter, unusual force movements, a spike in cyber probes against US and allied networks. Beijing was rattled. Perhaps time is no longer on China's side. Every exercise like Balikatan strengthens regional defense. Every FONOP pushes back China's asserted boundaries. Every attempt at intimidation is met not with retreat, but reinforcement. The Pacific is becoming sharper, faster, less predictable. And in this charged atmosphere, the risk of miscalculation skyrockets. One wrong radar blip, one nervous pilot, one ill-timed turn, that's all it could take to turn a routine transit into a flashpoint, into war. So, one destroyer, one narrow strait, one powerful message sent without firing a shot. But don't mistake the quiet for calm. The Taiwan Strait is now more than contested water. It's a stage, a pressure valve, a test site for modern deterrence. And the world is watching, waiting to see who blinks next. Because the next incident might not come with a warning, and the response might not be a press release. This wasn't just about one transit, it was about tempo, initiative, and the unwavering assertion that the U.S. Navy sails where international law allows, when it chooses no permission required.